Cambodia, my first real travel experience outside of a touristy week at Bali or Fiji, and as a law student on a university legal placement subject. How cool is this? After one whole day of travel, we arrive in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. The trusty old plane managed to completely suck most of the moisture out of me, and I'm left a dehydrated, cranky and headachy 23-year-old. Panadol and Hydrolyte might just be my best buddies through this trip. Emotions are certainly running high within my first few hours in Southeast Asia. Before coming to Cambodia, I was warned about cultural shock and what it will do to me, how it will make me feel. Yes, I felt it. I felt my heart pounding in this big wave and utter sympathy for these poor people. The shop owners who would sweep heavy incoming rain from their shop fronts, the young women who were seated in rows outside of seedy-looking venues, the kids who were walking barefoot down the streets trying to sell small items for a couple of dollars, and the tuk-tuk drivers who would come running towards you asking you to take a ride in their tuk-tuk so that perhaps one day they don't need to sleep in their transport anymore. This evolving cultural shock was exactly as I expected. What I didn't consider was the cultural shock I would feel after leaving this place that I'd called home for 3 weeks. Walking into the Singapore airport, I was nothing short of overwhelmed by the bright colours, lights and expensive shops. I was noticing things like people's clothing and how they interacted with each other. I was noticing the small things in life, although these things made me realise they perhaps weren't so small. Interesting how one of the biggest suggestions people give you when you're travelling is eat where the locals eat. Being one of the people that ended up having a hospital visit and also looking at some of the local delicacies along with how they're handled and stored for the day, such as within the Russian markets where it's hot, sweaty and dusty, not sure if anyone on our trip was game enough to take the advice of my well-travelled friends. Cambodia has certainly changed me as a person. I always thought the idea of travelling the globe was a scary thing. This trip made me realise that other countries have real people too. They have to abide by their laws, go to work every day, and look both ways before crossing the road. Although perhaps a few more times in Phnom Penh if you don't want to get flattened. I'm inspired to travel more, which in turn will assist me in learning more. My eyes and heart are open, and there is a big world out there just waiting to be appreciated.
Cambodia, a life-changing experience. The first week in Cambodia was so overwhelming for all of us. We're seeing the aftermath of the Khmer Rouge ourselves, visiting the Genocide Museum and the killing fields. We just had no idea what we were in for, the extent of tragedy and devastation of the recent history of the Khmer Rouge that it brought to Cambodia. It was truly heartbreaking. We've seen families with young children and the condition these communities live in. Villages that did not even have access to toilets and clean water. These conditions in Australia would be deemed unlivable. But what touched my heart was despite living in these conditions, the children and people of Cambodia are just full of lively spirit and happiness. My highlighted learning experience from Cambodia was just seeing how gender-based domestic violence is much of an issue in Cambodia as it is in Australia. It's an ongoing problem that is growing in both countries. I learnt of ways both Australia and Cambodia may be able to help such families dealing with domestic violence. These include things like counselling, both the perpetrator and the victim, instead of just punishing the perpetrator. Both countries need to find ways that help the perpetrator change the reasons why they are being violent. My experience in Cambodia has inspired me to help out in the community more, whether that may be in Australia, in Cambodia, or any other developing country we had in Cambodia, and just to the extent of how much these people that are less privileged need help. Cambodia has truly changed the way I see things and the way I will in the future.
I expected our trip to Cambodia to be challenging, but I didn't expect it to be relentless. As a mother, I would liken it to having your first child. Nothing quite prepares you for the reality. If the issues we faced weren't confronting enough, the city of Phnom Penh was chaotic and the heat relentless. Many of the organisations we went to only added to our daily discomfort. With the many flights of stairs to walk up, no air conditioning, poor sanitation, and difficulties understanding our hosts, we got to know a side of Cambodia that most tourists don't. There were so many things I learned from this trip, not only from the organisations we met with, but also in the many personal stories we heard. I've always been a silver lining sort of a person, but I saw that the attitude of the Khmer people takes the idea to the nth degree. Cambodia is still recovering from the reign of the Khmer Rouge. It was only 38 years ago when 2.5 million people were killed under the direction of Pol Pot. Those who were tortured and killed were people who were educated, professionals and intellectuals, foreigners, monks, anyone with government or religious ties, and anyone else they saw to be a threat. As you can imagine, this had a big impact on the country and the people, but yet the Khmer people don't seek justice in the same way we would. For them, it's history, and I really resonated with that. Another defining moment for me came from the stories of two people, a student I met at the Royal University of Law and Economics, and one of our guide friends, who shared their struggles with getting an education. The girl I met was the first girl in a rural community to just finish high school, let alone get a university scholarship to study law. In Cambodian culture, especially in rural communities, there's an expectation for children to help support their family, usually by working on the farm. And sadly, in very poor families, the family's need for food and money makes children especially vulnerable to being exploited. Desperate families sell their children to fake orphanages, they become child street sellers or beggars, or they find themselves the victims of child sex trafficking. I thought this girl studying law was incredibly lucky, and again I resonated with that. Our guide friend told us how he wanted an education, but it was against the wishes of his parents. He reasoned that his family were already poor, so it would not make a difference if they stayed poor a bit longer while he got an education. He knew that he had to release himself from poverty first, and then he could help release them. He understood that by lifting himself and his family from poverty, he was also contributing to a better society. It reminded me why it's okay to take care of my own needs first, so I'm in a better position not only to help my family, but also to contribute to society. In the end, all the challenges were worth it.
I didn't want to go to Cambodia after doing the research. The greed, corruption, political agenda, the list seemed to go on. Since arriving, my concerns have been a little transformed. Firstly, by being forced to acknowledge the country to which I belong is far from perfect. And secondly, realising the people of a community are not defined by their government. Judicial independence and the secure operation of the rule of law had lent me a certain patriotic superiority, which was rocked by a simple question from a Cambodian human rights organisation. I was asked, why does our country, with its infrastructure and support systems, send refugees to Cambodia? After visiting other organisations, a pattern emerged of Australia's $90 million aid package being gradually reallocated from non-profit social justice programs to the $40 million refugee resettlement deal. This has effectively removed foreign aid monies from helping the poor and destitute of Cambodia to further lining the pockets of a corrupt and extremely rich Prime Minister. The second transformation came slowly. Every NGO we visited showed an unassuming and tireless commitment to making Cambodia better, despite massive challenges. There was a wisdom and responsibility about the youth that belied an old collective soul. Perhaps due to having no educated people left to rely on after the Khmer Rouge, they were forced to forge their own way. The few older people, who could rightly be expected to exhibit sadness or anger, having witnessed genocide, alternately seemed to be some of the happiest people I met. I've always tried to see the blessings rather than the misfortune of my own life, especially when tragedy struck. The people of Cambodia epitomise this concept. Our guide, Mr. Makara, showed me the strength of his Prime Minister, the economic growth and stability he has achieved for his country when all I could see was totalitarian control. He saw the atrocities of the Khmer Rouge as contributing to modern tourism and explained that you can't change the past, but you can change the future. I'm ashamed to be from a country that, with all the fortune we enjoy, is complacent enough to allow our government to offload its problems with financial incentive to a country ill-equipped to help its own poor. While we can't change the refugee deal or our historical treatment of Aboriginal Australians, we can insist our government act according to our international human rights obligations and not simply pay lip service by throwing tax dollars at a difficult situation hoping it will go away. Currently 5 Cambodian citizens from ad hoc are in prison for exercising their right to free speech. Australians need to step up and use their democratic right to insist on ethical and moral conduct by our own politicians.